Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and watched sparks fly from the main console again. The smell of burning circuits filled the bridge of the UES Defiant like it did most mornings. Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez crawled out from under the navigation station with grease on his face and tools in both hands. "Sorry, Captain, but the navigation computer is acting up again," Pete said while wiping his hands on his already dirty uniform. "I can keep it running for maybe 6 more hours before it needs another fix." Jake nodded and tried not to show his frustration. The Defiant was 150 years old, and every system on the ship was held together with spare parts and hope. The Galactic Federation had given humanity this ancient cargo hauler when they joined the Alliance 5 years ago. It was supposed to be an honor, but Jake knew better. The Federation saw humans as a minor species with primitive technology, and this assignment proved it. Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her tactical station where she was trying to make sense of weapons that were older than her grandmother. "Captain, we have new orders from Federation Command," she said while reading from a cracked display screen. "Let me guess," Jake replied. "More patrol duty in the Kepler sector where absolutely nothing ever happens." Amy nodded and her shoulders slumped a little. She was brilliant with tactical systems, but being stuck on the Defiant meant her career was going nowhere fast. The Federation preferred their own species for important assignments, and humans were lucky to get patrol duty in empty space. Dr. Lisa Grant sat at the communications station trying to boost their long-range sensors with equipment that should have been in a museum. She was a xenobiologist who spoke 12 alien languages, but here she was fixing radio equipment because they could not afford a real communications officer. "The orders say we need to patrol grid 7 through 12 for the next 3 weeks, she said, without looking up from her work. Sergeant Kyle Brooks entered the bridge carrying a maintenance report that was probably full of bad news. He commanded the 12 Marines on board, which was barely enough to guard a space station, let alone a military vessel. His men spent most of their time helping Pete fix things because there was not much else for Marines to do on patrol duty. "Captain, the gravity generator in Section 4 is making weird noises again," Kyle said while handing over the report. "Pete says it might last another month if we're lucky." Jake took the report and tried not to think about what would happen if they lost gravity in the middle of space. The Defiant had been built as a cargo hauler, and converting it for military use had been done as cheaply as possible. Most Federation ships had backup systems for their backup systems, but the Defiant barely had working primary systems. "How are the crew holding up?" Jake asked Kyle quietly. "About as well as you'd expect, sir," Kyle replied. "They know we got the worst ship and the worst assignment in human space. Morale isn't exactly high." Jake understood how his crew felt because he felt the same way. 5 years ago, he had been a promising young officer with a bright future ahead of him. Then he made the mistake of questioning Federation tactics during a joint training exercise. He suggested that human creativity might be valuable in combat situations, but his Federation superiors did not appreciate the input. They transferred him to the Defiant and made it clear that this was where his career would end. Amy Carter had graduated top of her class from the academy, but she was human, so the good assignments went to Federation species instead. Pete Rodriguez was a mechanical genius who could fix anything, but the Federation preferred their own engineers for important ships. Dr. Grant could communicate with any alien species in the galaxy, but she was stuck fixing old equipment instead of doing real diplomatic work. Kyle Brooks was a decorated Marine who had served in 3 different conflicts, but he was commanding a squad on a patrol ship. Instead of leading troops in real combat, the bridge went quiet except for the humming and buzzing of old equipment that was always on the edge of breaking down. Everyone went back to their duties because there was nothing else they could do. Jake stared out at the empty space ahead of them and wondered if this was how his career would end. The Kepler sector was the most boring part of Federation space. It had a few mining colonies and some trade routes, but nothing that required serious military attention. The Federation sent old ships with human crews here because they figured nothing important would ever happen. It was a place where careers went to die. "Captain, I'm getting something on the long-range sensors," Dr. Grant said suddenly. Her voice had changed, and she sounded more alert than she had in weeks. "What kind of something?" Jake asked while turning his chair toward her station. "It's a distress signal coming from Grid 9, she replied while adjusting the ancient equipment. The signal is weak, but it's definitely Federation standard emergency frequency. Amy Carter quickly checked her tactical displays. Captain, there are no scheduled Federation ships in that area according to our patrol orders. Jake felt something change in his chest. After months of empty patrols, they finally had something that might be important. Can you identify the ship sending the signal? He asked Dr. Grant. I'm trying to boost the signal now, she replied while working frantically at her console. The equipment is old, but I think I can clean it up enough to get more information. Pete Rodriguez stopped what he was doing and looked up from the floor where he had been working. Even Kyle Brooks moved closer to hear what was happening. The crew suddenly seemed more alive than they had been in months. Got it, Dr. Grant announced. The signal is coming from the GSV Harmony. That's a Federation science vessel. The distress call says they are under attack by unknown hostiles. Jake felt his heart start beating faster. A science vessel under attack meant real trouble, and they were the only Federation ship in the area. The problem was that the Defiant was barely capable of defending itself, let alone rescuing another ship from hostile forces. How far away are they? Jake asked while standing up from his command chair. About 4 hours at maximum speed, Amy replied after checking her navigation computer. Captain, Pete said from the floor where he was still holding his tools. I should mention that if we push the engines to maximum speed, there's a good chance something important will break. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all watching him and waiting to see what he would do. Federation regulations said they should report the distress call to command and wait for orders. But by the time those orders came, the Harmony and her crew might be dead. Amy Carter looked at her captain with hope in her eyes for the first time in months. Dr. Grant had stopped working on her equipment and was waiting for his decision. Pete Rodriguez was already reaching for tools to prepare the engines. Kyle Brooks was thinking about his Marines and how they could help in a rescue mission. Jake Morrison made a decision that would change everything for his crew and his ship. Set course for the Harmony's position, he ordered. Maximum speed. The bridge exploded into activity as his crew prepared for their first real mission in years. None of them knew they were about to encounter something that would make their old cargo hauler the most feared ship in the galaxy. The UES Defiant shook violently as Pete Rodriguez pushed the ancient engines beyond their normal limits. Warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge while alarms buzzed constantly in the background. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair and watched his crew work with more energy than he had seen in months. Engine temperature is in the red zone, Pete called out from the engineering station where he was frantically adjusting power levels. But I think I can keep them running for another 3 hours before something explodes. Lieutenant Amy Carter studied her tactical screens. While trying to get more information about what they might face at the Harmony's location, the sensors on the Defiant were so old that they could barely detect objects at close range, let alone identify threats from a distance. Captain, I'm not getting much detail, but it looks like there are multiple ships near the Harmony's position, she reported. Dr. Lisa Grant continued, working on the communications equipment trying to establish contact with the science vessel. The distress signal had gone silent 20 minutes ago, which could mean the ship was destroyed or just that their transmitter was damaged. Still no response from the Harmony, she said while adjusting frequencies on equipment that belonged in a scrapyard. Sergeant Kyle Brooks had gathered his 12 Marines in the cargo bay and was checking their equipment. Most of their weapons were standard Federation issue, but some were old Earth designs that the other species considered primitive. Kyle preferred the human weapons because they were simpler and more reliable, even if they were not as advanced as alien technology. Captain, we're approaching the target area, Amy announced as she watched her navigation display. I'm starting to get better sensor readings now. Jake stood up and moved closer to the main view screen, which flickered and showed static every few seconds. What are we looking at? He asked while trying to make sense of the fuzzy images. The Harmony is there, but she's badly damaged, Amy replied while pointing at her screen. I'm reading 3 other ships that don't match any Federation designs in our database. Dr. Grant suddenly looked up from her communications console with excitement and fear in her eyes. Captain, I just intercepted a transmission from one of the unknown ships. The language is completely alien, but the tone sounds like combat commands. The main view screen finally stabilized enough to show them what they were facing. The GSV Harmony was a modern Federation science vessel about twice the size of the Defiant, but it was clearly in trouble. Sections of its hull were torn open and it was drifting without power. 3 black ships surrounded the damaged vessel like predators circling wounded prey. "Those ships don't look like anything I've ever seen," Amy said while studying the alien vessels through her targeting system. "They're about the same size as us, but their hulls seem to shift and change shape as I watch them." Jake stared at the enemy ships and felt a chill run down his spine. The 3 vessels were sleek and black with surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid metal. They moved in patterns that made no sense according to normal space combat tactics. One moment they would be attacking the Harmony from above and the next they would be below it, without seeming to change direction. "Captain, I'm detecting energy weapons firing from the alien ships," Amy reported. "But the beam patterns keep changing. First they're using plasma cannons, then particle beams, then something I can't even identify." "Are they trying different weapons to see what works best?" Jake asked while watching the strange attack patterns. "That's what it looks like, sir," Amy replied. "Every time they hit the Harmony with a different weapon type, the beam gets more powerful, like they're learning from each shot." Dr. Grant managed to boost their communications enough to pick up weak transmissions from the Harmony. "Captain, I'm getting emergency signals from the science vessel. They have survivors, but their shields are failing and life support is down to emergency power." Jake realized they were looking at something completely new and dangerous. The alien ships were not just attacking the Harmony, they were studying it. Every weapon they fired seemed designed to test the Federation vessel's defenses and learn how to overcome them. "Pete, how long before we're in weapons range?" Jake called out to his chief engineer. "About 10 minutes, Captain, but I should warn you that our weapons are nothing compared to what those alien ships are using," Pete replied while monitoring engine performance. "We've got old plasma cannons that fire in straight lines and basic shields that barely work." Amy Carter studied the tactical situation and shook her head. "Captain, those alien ships are using technology that's at least 50 years ahead of anything in the Federation fleet. Our weapons probably won't even scratch their hulls." Jake looked around his bridge at his crew and saw the same thoughts in their eyes. They were outgunned and outmatched by enemies using technology they did not understand. The smart thing to do would be to retreat and call for backup, but the Harmony's crew would be dead long before help arrived. "Captain, one of the alien ships just launched some kind of probe at the Harmony," Amy announced. "It looks like they're trying to board the science vessel." "Sir, we have to do something," Dr. Grant said while listening to increasingly desperate transmissions from the Harmony. "They're asking for immediate assistance." Jake made a decision that went against everything he had learned about space combat. Instead of running away or calling for backup, he decided to attack 3 superior alien vessels with the oldest and weakest ship in the human fleet. "Amy, target the alien ship closest to the Harmony," he ordered, while sitting back down in his command chair. "Pete, give me everything the engines can handle. Kyle, get your Marines ready for possible boarding action." "Captain, are you sure about this?" Amy asked while her hands moved across her weapons console. "We're about to attack ships that could probably destroy us without breaking a sweat. Those aliens don't know what we're capable of because we don't know what we're capable of either," Jake replied with a grin that surprised everyone, including himself. Sometimes being unpredictable is better than being powerful. The Defiant closed in on the 3 alien vessels while alarms continued to sound and equipment sparked and smoked throughout the ship. Pete Rodriguez worked miracles in the engine room, keeping power flowing to systems that should have failed years ago. Amy Carter prepared weapons that were considered obsolete by Federation standards. Dr. Grant tried to establish contact with the Harmony to coordinate their rescue attempt. "Entering. Weapons range in 30 seconds. Amy announced while targeting the lead alien vessel. The 3 black ships suddenly changed their attack pattern and turned toward the approaching Defiant. Their hulls rippled and shifted as new weapon ports opened along their sides. Energy readings spiked as they prepared to destroy this new threat with overwhelming firepower. "Captain, they're targeting us now," Amy reported while watching her tactical display. "All 3 ships are charging weapons that are reading off the scale." "Fire everything we have at the lead ship," Jake ordered while gripping his command chair. "Show them what humans can do when they're angry." The UES Defiant opened fire with every weapon it had while charging directly at 3 alien ships that could have been built by gods compared to their ancient cargo hauler. Plasma bolts and missile trails lit up space as the oldest human ship in the fleet began its first real battle in over a century. None of them knew they were about to discover that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to be too crazy for the enemy to predict. The alien ship's hull rippled like water when the Defiant's plasma bolt struck it. Captain Jake Morrison watched in amazement as the black vessel seemed to absorb the energy from their weapons and convert it into power for its own systems. The enemy ship glowed brighter after each hit instead of taking damage. "Captain, our weapons aren't working," Lieutenant Amy Carter reported while frantically adjusting her targeting systems. "Every time we hit them, they seem to get stronger." The three alien vessels turned their attention to the Defiant and opened fire with beams of energy that looked like nothing in Federation weapon databases. The first shots missed the old cargo hauler by several hundred meters, which surprised everyone on the bridge. "Why are they missing us?" Dr. Lisa Grant asked while monitoring the enemy communications. "Their targeting systems should be much better than ours." Jake studied the alien attack patterns and noticed something strange. The enemy ships were firing test shots at different ranges and angles, like they were trying to learn how the Defiant moved through space. "They're not trying to destroy us yet," he realized. "They're studying us." Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez crawled out from under his engineering console with a wild look in his eyes. "Captain, I have an idea, but you're going to think I'm crazy," he announced while holding a damaged power coupling in his hands. "We're fighting 3 ships that should be able to destroy us in seconds, so crazy sounds good right now," Jake replied, while watching another enemy beam miss them by a narrow margin. "What if we give them something they can't study?" Pete suggested, while pointing at the sparking equipment around the bridge. "Our ship is so old and broken that half our systems don't work the way they're supposed to. Maybe that's actually an advantage." Amy Carter looked up from her weapons console with understanding dawning in her eyes. "The aliens are trying to predict our movements, but our navigation system is so unreliable that we can't even predict our own movements." "Exactly," Pete said with excitement. "I can overload the steering system and make us move in completely random patterns. The aliens won't be able to target us because we won't know where we're going either." Jake grinned at his chief engineer and realized that their ship's greatest weakness might be their greatest strength. "Do it," he ordered while bracing himself for whatever Pete had planned. Pete disappeared under his console again and began rewiring systems in ways that would horrify any properly trained engineer. Sparks flew and alarms sounded as he connected power relays that were never meant to work together. The Defiant suddenly lurched sideways without warning and began moving in a zigzag pattern that made no sense. "Warning, navigation system failure," the ship's computer announced in a voice that sounded bored. "Manual control recommended." "Manual control is impossible when the controls don't work," Amy laughed while trying to keep her weapons targeted on the confused alien ships. "This is the most insane thing I've ever seen." The 3 black vessels tried to adjust their firing patterns to match the Defiant's erratic movements, but every prediction they made was wrong. The ancient cargo hauler spun and rolled and changed direction without any logical pattern because its own systems couldn't decide which way to go. "Captain, one of the alien ships is moving closer," Dr. Grant reported while watching her sensors. "I think they're trying to figure out what we're doing." Jake saw an opportunity in the enemy's confusion. "Amy, can you target that ship while we're spinning around like a broken toy?" "I can try, but our targeting computer is having the same problems the aliens are having," Amy replied while manually aiming their weapons. "I'll have to fire by instinct and hope for the best." The Defiant's plasma cannons fired at the approaching alien vessel just as Pete's sabotaged navigation system sent them into an unexpected barrel roll. The timing was purely accidental, but the result was spectacular. Their weapons hit the enemy ship from an angle that no computer could have calculated, and the alien vessel's adaptive shields were completely unprepared for the attack. "Direct hit!" Amy shouted with amazement. Their shields just collapsed. The alien ship's hull stopped rippling and started showing actual damage from the Defiant's ancient weapons. Sections of black metal broke away and drifted into space while energy discharges flickered across the enemy vessel's surface. Their adaptive systems can't handle attacks that make no sense, Jake realized while watching the damaged alien ship try to retreat. "Keep firing while we still have them confused." The Defiant continued its chaotic dance through space while Amy fired their weapons whenever she thought she had a target. Most of her shots missed completely, but the few that connected did serious damage because the alien ships couldn't adapt to attacks that came from impossible angles. Pete Rodriguez emerged from under his console covered in grease and grinning like a madman. "Captain, I can make this even better," he announced while holding a handful of burned circuits. "What if we overload the cargo bay doors and use them as weapons?" "How do you use cargo bay doors as weapons?" Dr. Grant asked while trying to maintain communications with the damaged Harmony. "Simple," Pete replied while already heading toward the cargo bay controls. "We open them at the wrong time and let the pressure blast knock things around. It's not fancy, but it might surprise our new friends." Sergeant Kyle Brooks appeared on the bridge carrying a rocket launcher that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Captain, my Marines want to help, but we can't exactly board those alien ships," he said while watching the battle through the main view screen. "Actually, you might be able to help more than you think," Jake said while studying the tactical situation. "Amy, can you get us close enough to that damaged alien ship for Kyle to take a shot with old-fashioned human weapons?" "I can try, but with Pete's navigation modifications, I can't promise where we'll end up," Amy replied, while wrestling with her steering controls. The Defiant spun toward the damaged alien vessel in a spiral pattern that defied all laws of physics and common sense. The enemy ship tried to target them, but its computers gave up trying to predict their movement and started firing randomly. "Kyle, you have about 10 seconds before we spin away again," Jake announced while holding onto his command chair. Kyle Brooks aimed his ancient rocket launcher through the bridge view screen and fired at the alien ship from point-blank range. The rocket was a simple explosive warhead with no guidance system or fancy technology, but it hit the enemy vessel just as Pete opened the cargo bay doors and created a pressure wave that pushed the rocket faster than it was designed to go. The explosion tore through the alien ship's damaged hull and caused a chain reaction that lit up space like a small star. The other two enemy vessels immediately stopped attacking and began retreating at speeds that made the Defiant look like it was standing still. "They're running away," Amy announced with disbelief in her voice. "We actually scared them off." The bridge went silent, except for the usual sounds of sparking equipment and failing systems. Nobody could quite believe what had just happened. Their ancient cargo hauler had defeated technology that was decades ahead of anything in the Federation fleet by being too broken and unpredictable to understand. "Captain, I'm getting a transmission from the Harmony," Dr. Grant reported while working frantically at her communications console. "They're requesting permission to come aboard for emergency medical treatment." Jake looked around his bridge at his crew and saw something he hadn't seen in years. They looked proud of themselves and their impossible old ship. For the first time, since joining the Federation, they had accomplished something that mattered. "Pete, can you get life support working in the cargo bay?" Jake asked his chief engineer. "Already on it, Captain," Pete replied while heading back to his engineering station. "After what we just did, fixing life support should be easy." None of them realized that word of their victory would spread through Federation space like wildfire, and that their little cargo hauler was about to become the most famous ship in the galaxy. Dr. Zephyr from the rescued science vessel stood in the Defiant's cargo bay and stared at the human crew with amazement in her large golden eyes. The Altarian scientist was tall and graceful like most of her species, but she looked shaken by her recent experience with the alien attackers. "Captain Morrison, your crew has accomplished something that should have been impossible," she said, while Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez worked on temporary life support systems around them. "Those ships were using technology that adapts and learns from every attack. No Federation vessel has ever survived an encounter with them." Captain Jake Morrison helped carry wounded survivors from the Harmony while listening to Dr. Zephyr's explanation. The science vessel had lost 12 crew members in the attack, but 23 had survived thanks to the Defiant's unexpected rescue. "What exactly were those ships?" Lieutenant Amy Carter asked while checking on the injured survivors. "They didn't match anything in our tactical databases." Dr. Zephyr's expression grew dark as she remembered the terror of being hunted by the mysterious vessels. "We call them Void Hunters based on our analysis of their attack patterns. They are an ancient race that was thought to be extinct for over 1,000 years." Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from where she was helping treat wounded survivors with their basic medical supplies. "If they've been extinct for so long, then where did these ships come from?" she asked while bandaging a plasma burn on an injured Carillion engineer. "That's what our research expedition was trying to determine," Dr. Zephyr replied while accessing data from a portable computer she had rescued from her ship. We detected energy signatures in the outer rim that matched old Void Hunter technology. We were investigating when they attacked us. Sergeant Kyle Brooks finished securing the cargo bay and joined the conversation. His Marines had been helping move supplies and wounded crew members, but now they gathered around to hear about their mysterious enemies. Dr. Zephyr, how many of these Void Hunter ships are out there? Jake asked while helping Pete install emergency lighting in their makeshift medical bay. The Altarian scientist's golden eyes grew even more worried as she checked her data. According to our sensor readings before the attack, there are hundreds of ships gathering in the outer rim. Maybe thousands. They appear to be preparing for some kind of large-scale operation. Amy Carter felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what that might mean. Are you saying they're planning to invade Federation space? She asked while hoping she was wrong. That's exactly what I'm saying. Dr. Zephyr confirmed while showing them star charts on her portable computer. The energy readings suggest they have been building ships and gathering forces for decades. Your encounter with 3 scouts was just the beginning. Pete Rodriguez stopped working on the life support systems and looked at the group with concern. If these Void Hunters are so advanced and their ships can adapt to any weapon we use, then how is the Federation supposed to stop them? He asked. Dr. Zephyr turned to look at the ancient human ship around them with new understanding in her eyes. That's what makes your victory so important. You defeated them using methods they couldn't understand or adapt to. Your ship is so primitive and unpredictable that their advanced technology couldn't compensate. Jake Morrison realized they had stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple rescue mission. If the Void Hunters were really planning an invasion, then the Federation needed to know immediately. Dr. Grant, can you send a priority message to Federation Command about this threat? He asked. I can try, Captain, but our communications equipment is barely strong enough to reach the nearest starbase. Dr. Grant replied while examining their damaged transmitter. It might take several hours to get through. Dr. Zephyr accessed her portable computer again and pulled up more disturbing data. Captain Morrison, there's something else you need to know about the Void Hunters. Their ships don't just adapt to weapons and defenses. They also study and copy the technology they encounter. What does that mean exactly? Kyle Brooks asked while checking his Marines' equipment. It means every Federation ship they attack makes them stronger, Dr. Zephyr explained with fear in her voice. They learn from plasma cannons and develop better plasma cannons. They study shield generators and build improved shield generators. Each encounter teaches them more about how to defeat us. Amy Carter understood the implications immediately. So if the Federation sends modern ships with advanced weapons to fight them, the Void Hunters will just copy that technology and use it against us, she said while feeling sick to her stomach. Exactly, Dr. Zephyr confirmed. But your ship used weapons and tactics that are so old and simple that there was nothing for them to learn from. They couldn't adapt to chaos and unpredictability. Pete Rodriguez grinned as he realized what the alien scientist was saying. So our junk heap of a ship is actually the perfect weapon against these advanced aliens because we're too primitive for them to understand, he said while patting a sparking console affectionately. That's not entirely accurate, Dr. Zephyr corrected while studying the human crew with scientific curiosity. Your technology is primitive, but your tactics were something entirely different. The way you fought was creative and unpredictable in ways that go beyond simple technology. Dr. Grant finally managed to establish communication with Federation Command and began transmitting their report about the Void Hunter threat. The response came back within an hour, and it was not what anyone expected. Captain, they're ordering us to return to Starbase 7 immediately for debriefing, Dr. Grant announced while reading the official response. They want to speak with Dr. Zephyr about her research. Jake felt uneasy about the Federation's quick response. Something about the tone of the message suggested that Command was not taking the Void Hunter threat as seriously as they should. What's our estimated travel time to Starbase 7, he asked Amy. About 18 hours at maximum speed if Pete can keep the engines running, Amy replied while checking their navigation computer. Pete Rodriguez was already back under his engineering console making adjustments to their overworked systems. I can get us there, Captain, but I'll need to repair about half the ship when we arrive, he called, out while sparks flew around him. Dr. Zephyr spent the journey studying the Defiance systems and interviewing the crew about their battle tactics. She was particularly interested in how they had used their ship's mechanical failures as weapons against the Void Hunters, Captain, Morrison, I need to warn you about something, she said privately, while they were traveling through hyperspace. The Federation Council has a tendency to dismiss threats that come from minor species. They may not believe your report about defeating the Void Hunters. Why wouldn't they believe us? Jake asked while watching Pete work on yet another failing system. Because you're human and your ship is ancient, Dr. Zephyr replied honestly. The major species in the Federation consider themselves superior to humans in every way. They will find it difficult to accept that you accomplished something their advanced ships could not. Jake Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew, working with equipment that belonged in a museum, and realized they were about to face a different kind of battle. The Void Hunters might be preparing to invade Federation space, but first they would have to convince the Federation that the threat was real. Dr. Zephyr, will you support our report when we reach Starbase 7? He asked the Altarian scientist. Captain Morrison, after what I witnessed, I will support any plan that involves using human unpredictability against the Void Hunters, she replied with determination. The galaxy may depend on it. The UES Defiant continued its journey toward Starbase 7, while its crew prepared for a battle they could not win with weapons. They would have to convince the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy that sometimes being primitive was the most advanced strategy of all. Admiral Vexthar dismissed Captain Jake Morrison's report with a wave of his four-armed hand. The proud Zentarian stood behind his massive desk at Starbase 7 and looked at the human crew like they were children telling fantasy stories. Captain Morrison, your claims about defeating advanced alien vessels are difficult to believe, Admiral Vexithar said, while his translator made his voice sound cold and mechanical. The UES Defiant is a cargo hauler that should have been scrapped decades ago. Dr. Zephyr stepped forward and activated her portable computer to show the data she had collected during the Void Hunter attack. Admiral, I was there during the encounter. Captain Morrison's crew saved my ship and my research team using tactics that confused technology far superior to anything in the Federation fleet. Dr. Zephyr, you suffered a traumatic experience, Admiral Vexthar replied while barely glancing at her data. Your judgment may have been affected by the stress of combat. These Void Hunters you describe sound like legends from ancient mythology. Lieutenant Amy Carter felt anger building in her chest as she watched the Federation's most powerful military commander ignore evidence that could save billions of lives. Admiral, we have sensor recordings of the battle and samples of Void Hunter technology from their destroyed ship, she said while trying to keep her voice respectful. Admiral Vexthar finally looked at the data, but his expression showed he had already made up his mind. These readings could be from any number of pirate vessels using stolen Federation technology. There is no proof that an extinct species has returned to threaten civilized space. Chief Engineer Pete Rodriguez stepped forward carrying a piece of black metal that rippled and shifted in his hands. Admiral, this hull fragment came from the alien ship we destroyed. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of working with starship materials. Interesting, but hardly conclusive, Admiral Vexthar said while dismissing the evidence with another wave of his hand. Captain Morrison, your orders are to return to patrol duty in the Kepler sector. This briefing is concluded. Jake Morrison felt frustration and desperation as he realized the Federation was going to ignore the greatest threat they had ever faced. Admiral, if you're wrong about this, then thousands of Federation ships and billions of lives could be lost when the Void Hunters invade. Captain Morrison, you are dismissed, Admiral Vexthar repeated while turning his back on the human crew. Guards, please escort these humans back to their vessel. Dr. Zephyr watched in horror as Federation security officers began moving toward Jake and his crew. She had spent her entire career working within the Federation system, but now she realized that system was about to get everyone killed through arrogance and prejudice. Wait, she called out while moving to stand beside Captain Morrison. Admiral Vexthar, I am requesting immediate transfer to the UES Defiant to continue my research into Void Hunter technology. Admiral Vexthar turned around with surprise and anger in his large blue eyes. Dr. Zephyr, you are one of our most valuable scientists. I cannot allow you to waste your talents on a human patrol ship. Then you are making a mistake that will cost the Federation everything, Dr. Zephyr replied while gathering her research equipment. Captain Morrison, I would be honored to serve aboard your vessel. Jake Morrison looked at the Altarian scientist with gratitude and respect. Having Dr. Zephyr on his crew would give them credibility with other species who might be willing to listen when the Federation would not. The UES Defiant left Starbase 7 under a cloud of official disapproval, but Jake Morrison had no intention of returning to boring patrol duty. Dr. Zephyr used her scientific contacts to arrange meetings with researchers and military officers from other species who had reported strange encounters in recent months. "Captain, I've been analyzing reports from 17 different star systems," Dr. Zephyr announced while working at a computer station that Pete Rodriguez had installed in their small briefing room. "The pattern is clear. Void Hunter scouts have been testing Federation defenses for months. Lieutenant Amy Carter studied tactical reports from ships that had encountered unknown vessels and barely survived. Most of these encounters were dismissed as pirate attacks or equipment malfunctions. The Federation command refused to investigate further. Dr. Lisa Grant had been monitoring Federation communication channels and discovered something disturbing. "Captain, I'm intercepting reports of increased military activity in the Outer Rim. It sounds like the Void Hunters are massing their invasion fleet." Sergeant Kyle Brooks entered the briefing room carrying a message pad with urgent news. "Captain, we just received a transmission from Commander Nell Voss of the Carillion Defense Force. His patrol ship was attacked by 6 Void Hunter vessels last week." Jake Morrison realized they were running out of time to prepare for the invasion that Federation Command refused to acknowledge. "Dr. Zephyr, how long do you estimate before the main Void Hunter fleet attacks Federation space?" "Based on the pattern of scout attacks and energy readings from the Outer Rim, I would estimate 2 weeks at most, Dr. Zephyr replied while showing them star charts covered with red warning markers. "Possibly less." Pete Rodriguez looked up from where he was working on improved weapons systems using salvaged parts and creative engineering. "Captain, I've been thinking about what made us successful against those 3 Void Hunter ships. Maybe we can teach other crews to fight the same way." "How do you teach someone to be unpredictable?" Amy Carter asked, while wondering if their tactics could be copied by other ships. "Simple," Pete replied with a grin. "We find other ships with old equipment and crews that are willing to break every rule in the Federation manual. The more broken and unreliable their systems are, the better they'll do against Void Hunter technology." Dr. Zephyr understood what the human engineer was suggesting and felt excitement building in her chest. "You want to create a fleet of deliberately primitive ships that can confuse advanced adaptive technology." "Exactly," Jake Morrison said while realizing they had discovered something that could save the galaxy. "The Federation won't listen to warnings about the Void Hunter threat, but maybe we can build our own defense force using ships and crews that nobody else wants." Over the next 10 days, the UES Defiant became the center of an unofficial alliance between species and crews that the Federation had dismissed as unimportant. Old cargo haulers and outdated patrol ships began gathering in the Kepler sector under Jake Morrison's command. Commander Nell Voss arrived with his damaged Carillion vessel and a crew that specialized in improvised repairs. Engineer Grix brought a Danubian transport ship that had been modified with weapons that violated every Federation safety regulation. Captain Maria Santos commanded an old Earth freighter that her crew had turned into a mobile workshop for building unconventional weapons. "Captain Morrison, we now have 23 ships and over 400 crew members ready to fight." Amy Carter reported while reviewing their growing fleet roster. "Most of them are using equipment that's at least 50 years old." "Perfect," Jake replied while watching their ragtag fleet practice chaotic attack formations that made no tactical sense. "The older and more unreliable, the better." Dr. Zephyr's long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving toward Federation space, just as their unofficial fleet finished their preparations. "Captain, the Void Hunter invasion force is approaching. I'm reading over 2,000 ships using technology that's centuries ahead of anything we have." Jake Morrison looked at his ancient cargo haulers surrounded by other ships that the Federation considered worthless, and realized they were about to become the galaxy's last hope against an enemy that could adapt to any conventional attack. "All ships prepare for battle," he announced over the communication system. "Today we show the galaxy that sometimes the weakest become the strongest when they refuse to give up." The UES Defiant led its fleet of misfits and outcasts toward the EAD's greatest battle in galactic history, while Federation Command still refused to believe the threat was real. None of them knew that their impossible victory was about to make every advanced species in the galaxy afraid of what humans could accomplish when they stopped trying to be civilized.